I had no room left for fear. When someone has been buried alive by a lie, the only pain that remains is the silence they choose for themselves. And I, Abigail Callahan, had been silent long enough. On Monday morning, I walked into a lawyer's office in downtown Vancouver with a thick briefcase and a face void of emotion. The office was small, simple, but tidy. Sunlight filtered through the glass windows, landing on the file I brought with me. Every page a piece of my life, living proof that I never left this world the way they claimed. The person meeting me was attorney Jacob Miles, a young man in his early 30s, neatly cut brown hair, thin-framed glasses. As I opened my briefcase and laid each document across the table, he just sat there, frozen, eyes wide and barely blinking. "This is my passport," I said, pushing forward the U.S. passport stamped repeatedly from Vancouver, Seattle, Toronto. "Here are my rental contracts, pay stubs, tax documents, and Canadian residency card. All dated during the same time Oregon officials listed me as deceased." Jacob flipped through a few pages quickly, then looked straight at me. "You're saying you were falsely declared dead?" I nodded. "And my family used that to transfer all my assets to my sister, Emily Callahan. Not just my personal belongings, but also my grandparents' inheritance fund and some shares in the company I used to work for." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. "I've never handled anything like this before." "I don't need you to be surprised," I replied, my voice strangely calm. "I need you to help me reclaim my identity, and if possible, hold the people who orchestrated this accountable." He exhaled slowly, then nodded. "We'll start by filing a petition to revoke the death certificate. In parallel, I'll contact the Oregon State authorities and begin preparing a case for document fraud and inheritance abuse. But," he hesitated, "this process won't be quick. It could take months." I looked up at him, my eyes steady. "I don't have months. Because they're holding a memorial for me this weekend." Jacob froze. "A memorial? But they already held a funeral." "I know." I gave a bitter smile. "But apparently one fake funeral wasn't enough. They want a second performance, bigger, more public, and this time, I'll be there to watch them act." That very night, I received a message from an unknown number. No name, no greeting, just a single line. "Memorial for Abigail Callahan. Sunday, St. Luke Church, Portland." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. St. Luke, the church where I once sang in the children's choir, where my parents used to take family Christmas photos every year. They chose that place to continue the lie, a sacred place full of memories, now turned into a stage for their false grief. I stood by the window, city lights reflecting on the glass. Inside me there was no anger, no doubt, only a cold clarity. I had been discarded, erased, replaced, but now I would return. Not to apologize, not to plead. I would return to reclaim the truth. I hired a freelance journalist who had reported on complex inheritance lawsuits. I gave her every document, from the forged death certificate to the illegally transferred estate records. She promised to keep my identity confidential until the right moment to expose the truth. I said only one thing: "I'll give you that moment." I also had a long black coat, tailored, simple but elegant, not as a disguise, but to match the role I would play at the memorial, the one who returned from the forgotten. I wasn't sure who would attend that day. Relatives, old friends, people who turned their backs on me without a word. But I knew one thing for sure: they would never forget that day, not because of the scripted eulogies, but because I would walk in at the moment they least expected and pull the curtain down, letting the light shine on the truth they had buried for 3 years. That morning, the sky over Portland was oddly gray. A light drizzle fell, as if the city was bowing its head for something, or someone. I stood across the small street, looking at St. Luke Church, once a place of childhood memories, Now, where my family would remember me again. The church lights were glowing, luxury cars lined the entrance. People dressed in perfect black attire entered with faces showing perfect sorrow. But I knew, beneath that moral facade, no one truly grieved. I pulled my coat collar up, fastened the final button, and slowly crossed the street. Inside, the service had already started. Through the slightly open door, I heard the choir singing Amazing Grace. The pure voices echoed through the sacred space. A perfect backdrop for the tragedy they wanted the world to believe. As the song ended, a man stood. My father. Abigail. She was a complicated soul, he began, his voice slow but clear. She wasn't always easy to understand, but we loved her. We did everything we could. My mother sat below, lace handkerchief in hand, eyes red. She nodded gently with each word he said, as if memories were returning. But I knew. This was just a scene from a script they had rehearsed well. I placed my hand on the heavy wooden door, took a deep breath, and pushed. The door opened with a long groan echoing through the church. Light from outside flooded in like a cold wind, sweeping through the packed pews. Murmurs rippled across the room. Some turned, some stared. Then one voice, choked in disbelief, broke the silence. Oh my God, is that Abigail? I stepped in, each stride slow but firm. The sound of my heels on the stone floor echoed like drum beats in their chests. I didn't look at anyone, didn't need to say anything. My presence alone was the answer to every question they had avoided for the last 3 years. As I reached the center aisle, the whole church fell into dead silence. My mother stood suddenly, lips trembling, eyes wide, then collapsed, her body limp in Aunt Margaret's arms. A perfect faint, perhaps rehearsed in her mind many times. My father stood frozen at the pulpit, eyes wide, lips moving but forming no words. The microphone slipped from his hand, landing with a sharp, dry thud on the sound system. And Emily, my sister, stood near the white flower arrangements, clutching a glass of red wine. When our eyes met, I saw it clearly. Fear. Real fear, not an act. Her hand shook so badly the wine spilled on her ivory silk dress. A red stain spread like blood across the fabric. I stepped onto the platform, stood exactly where they had just said goodbye to someone still breathing. I turned, faced the crowd. Faces I never thought I'd see again. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need tears. I only needed the truth. I heard I had died, I began, my voice steady, firm. But as you can see, I'm still here, alive, real, and ready to tell the truth. No one spoke. Some sat frozen. A few phones began to rise, red recording lights blinking under the church's glow. Good. Let the world see. I opened the file I had prepared. This is my passport. These are my Canadian lease documents. These are my tax returns, my employment contracts. These are government documents proving I never died despite the death certificate someone submitted. I glanced down at my father, now sitting silently in the front pew, eyes fixed on the floor. I was falsely declared dead, erased from my family, and when I disappeared, all my assets were transferred to my sister. Inheritance funds, real estate, company shares, everything that once belonged to me. Emily tried to speak, but I raised my hand. Don't. Not now. You had 3 years to speak. I looked around the church, meeting every eye, friends, relatives, people who once claimed to care. They lowered their heads, unable to face me. This isn't a memorial, I said, my voice deepening. This is a performance, but unfortunately for you, today, the audience has woken up, and the curtain is about to fall. I closed the folder. My chest felt lighter. I didn't need to say more. I had come back, not just in body, but with a truth no one could deny. I stood in the heart of St. Luke's Church, file in hand, my gaze cutting through the room like a blade. No more hymns, no more fake sniffles. Only the suffocating silence of people dragged out of a dream they thought they controlled. I held up the documents, my voice sharp and deliberate, each word sinking deep into every soul in the room. There was no car accident in Spain, no highway collision, no brain trauma, and certainly no death of Abigail Callahan. I haven't left North America in 3 years. Everything you've just heard is a lie. Gasps echoed from the back rows. I saw a young woman raise her phone, her camera light blinking. Then another, and another. The truth was being recorded, and this time, they couldn't erase it. I turned, pointing straight at my father, who still kept his head bowed. You signed the fake death certificate. You submitted it to the state of Oregon to legalize a death that never happened, all part of a plan. To erase me. To erase a daughter who dared to speak the truth about the failures inside this family. My mother, now recovered from her staged collapse, gripped Aunt Margaret's hand tightly. Her face pale, her eyes wild as she looked at me like I was a ghost. And you? I said, looking straight into my mother's eyes, my tone firm but calm. You stayed silent. You knew the truth. You knew I did nothing wrong. But you let me take the fall and kept feeding the lie to protect Emily. I turned to Emily, my sister who once held my hand walking to school, who used to sleep beside me on Christmas Eve. Now, standing like a statue, fists clutching the stained hem of her dress, her flawless makeup beginning to smudge with sweat and tears. You took money from the company, nearly $60,000. I knew. Our parents knew. But instead of owning up, you blamed me, and they chose to erase me, like I never existed. No one responded. No one dared. I took a deep breath, opened the second folder. Inside were copies of the death certificate, asset transfers, government-issued identity verifications from Canada, bank statements, all neatly arranged, stamped, signed. Not speculation, evidence. I'll be submitting these to federal court and the Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office, I continued. Forgery. Financial fraud. Exploiting a dead person to seize assets. And if you're lucky, Emily, maybe you'll get to keep a few pairs of shoes before selling everything to pay it back. Gasps erupted behind me. Aunt Margaret whispered, This can't be real. I turned and looked directly at her. It's real, more than anything that's ever happened in this church. At that moment, a man stood up. My Uncle Frank, my father's younger brother. He stepped forward, staring at me in shock. Abigail, we truly... No one called to check on me. I cut him off. No one texted, no one emailed. One message. One. But instead, you all stayed silent. And that silence makes you complicit. I placed the final folder on the pulpit, gave a small nod. This is everything I need. The rest, I leave to the law. I stepped down the stairs, walking the center aisle. Every eye followed me. Some stunned, some averted, some still recording, following every step like a real-life documentary. When I pushed the church doors open, the afternoon light hit my face. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because behind me, the curtain of lies had fallen. And I knew, from that moment forward, they could never put the play back together. The last light of the afternoon poured down the steps of St. Luke's Church as I walked outside. The breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and the musty wood from the old saint statue by the yard, but I felt nothing except the relief spreading through me. Light as if a stone had been lifted from my chest after 3 crushing years. Behind me, the church door hadn't yet closed. I heard the shuffle of feet, chaotic whispers, and someone crying. Maybe my mother, maybe Emily. But for the first time in years, I didn't look back. I didn't need to know what they thought, didn't need to hear whatever story they'd invent to justify what they'd done. What needed to be said, I'd said. What needed to be proven, I'd proven. The rest now belongs to justice. The next day, I sat in Attorney Jacob Miles's office, the marks from my heavy briefcase still faint on my hand. He carefully filed each document into labeled folders, nodding as he checked each seal and signature. "Everything's in order," he said calmly. "The petition to revoke the death certificate has been submitted to the state court, along with lawsuits for document fraud, asset seizure, and false reporting." I nodded, saying nothing. What I felt now wasn't triumph. It was release. Jacob looked up at me. "You know, not many people have the courage to face down their whole family, especially after what they've done." I smiled slightly. I didn't come back to be a hero. I just didn't want to be buried under something that wasn't true. 2 weeks later, I received a notice from the Oregon Department of Vital Records. The death status had been revoked, my identity fully reinstated. A simple name, Abigail Elise Callahan, was finally back in its rightful place in the system, no longer stamped deceased. The news spread faster than I expected. The church video was shared on social media, clipped into segments, going viral under the title, "The Woman Who Walked into Her Own Memorial and Exposed a Family Secret." Over 1 million views in just 3 days. People reached out to me, some with admiration, others with doubt, some reporters requesting exclusive interviews. I declined them all. I didn't want fame. I just wanted peace. The official investigation launched at the beginning of the next month. The Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office summoned my father, my mother, and Emily for questioning. Bank accounts were frozen, property transfers reviewed. What they once thought would stay hidden forever was now in the hands of the law. I didn't attend the first hearing. My lawyer said I had the right to, but I was too tired of the stares. The justifications, the cycle of false morality. Instead, I returned to Vancouver, the city that saved me when the world turned its back. I walked into the bookstore where I used to work and hugged the owner, Mrs. Ruth, the woman who once kept my first handwritten job application. "You came back," she whispered, eyes glistening. "No, I never left," I replied. "I rented a new apartment, smaller, quieter, with a balcony facing the river. Each morning I made coffee, watched the sunlight glimmer on the water, listened to soft classical music. No more nightmares, no more dreams of being chased by the past." I didn't return to forgive. I didn't need their late apologies, because forgiveness is a gift, and none of them deserved it. I came back to reclaim my right to exist. And for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. My story isn't just about reclaiming an identity. It's a reminder that truth always matters, even when buried the deepest. In a world where someone can be erased with a lie, the most important thing is not to let yourself disappear from your own life. I didn't return for revenge or approval. I came back to prove that my existence is real, and I deserve to live it, on my own terms. What do you think about Abigail's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional and unexpected family stories. I was just about to make coffee when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in ages, Mrs. Helen Dorsey, our former neighbor from Oregon. My heart skipped a beat. Just seeing that name was enough to bring back a flood of memories I thought were long buried, crashing in like waves against a cliff. No greeting, no context, just a short message with a video attached. "Abigail, I truly can't believe what I saw today. My deepest condolences." I tapped the video, my palms already starting to sweat, though the coffee remained unmade. The frame opened to St. Mary's Church, the same one I used to visit every Christmas as a child. Every candle, every stained glass window looked exactly as I remembered. But the atmosphere was different. Somber. Reverent. Chilling. The camera slowly moved toward the altar. My parents were standing there. My mother wore a black lace dress, her old pearl necklace around her neck, a white handkerchief dabbing gently at her eye. Beside her, my father quietly read from a piece of paper, his voice trembling but clear. And behind them was a casket. Next to it stood a large photo of me, surrounded by white wreaths. I froze. Abigail was always a troubled girl, my father said, his voice echoing from the phone as if it had exploded in my head. But we always loved her, we did everything we could. I sat straight up, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. My vision blurred, not from tears but from disbelief. I rewound the video. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't staged. Their faces were painfully real. But their eyes showed no grief. Not a single real tear fell. My mother added, "It's such a shame Abigail left this world so soon. We only hope she's found peace." I was alive, breathing, still paying rent every month, working at a small bookstore in Seattle, and yet they held a funeral for me? I stared at the video, a chill crawling up my spine. This couldn't be a mistake. I hadn't gone missing, hadn't had an accident, hadn't experienced any major event that would lead people to think I was gone. This was intentional. I set the phone down, but my eyes didn't leave the screen. The pews were packed, everyone dressed in black. I recognized faces from childhood. My old piano teacher, the former gardener, even Uncle Roy, who hadn't left the state in over 20 years. Everyone believed I was dead. Not one person called to verify. No one messaged. Not a single question. I wasn't just erased from the family. I was buried alive. I slid down onto the kitchen floor, breath unsteady, the organ music from the funeral video still echoing in my ears. I kept replaying the clip, like I was searching for a loophole, a sign that this was all a misunderstanding. But there was none. This was a story. Crafted, careful, deliberate. And at that moment, one thing became clear as sunlight streaming through a window. This wasn't an accident, this was a choice. I used to believe that family was the one thing in the world that would never turn its back on you. That no matter how doubtful the world became, your parents would always be your foundation. But 3 years ago, that belief was shattered by a single, cold, merciless phone call. Back then, I was working at the architecture firm my family had founded in ADS in Portland, Callahan and Hart Design, where my father, Richard Callahan, was the CEO, and my mother, Judith, handled the finances. I was a project coordinator. Hardworking, discreet, never had any major missteps. Everything seemed fine until one day, the end-of-quarter balance sheet turned into a nightmare. $63,000 had disappeared from the project operations fund. It wasn't enough to ruin the company, but it was enough to send everyone into a panic. I remember the emergency meeting clearly. My father holding the bank statement, his face heavy as stone. My mother said nothing, just looked at me like she already knew the answer. "Abigail," he said, each word weighed down. "Is there something you need to confess to us?" I stared at them, stunned. "What do you mean?" "I didn't do anything wrong." But it was his next sentence that struck like a dagger. "You're the only one with access to the internal code for that account besides your mother. You think we don't know that?" My jaw dropped. "Wait, you think I took that money? You really believe I could do that?" Silence. No one answered. Just a flicker of avoidance from the corner of the room. Emily, my younger sister by 4 years, stood by the coffee machine, arms crossed, tapping her deep red nails against a ceramic mug. No defense, no support, just... And then I understood. Emily was the one who did it. She'd only recently joined the finance department. My parents had always adored her, believed she was clever, charming, a natural in marketing. But I'd seen the strange designer shopping receipts in her drawer, the weekend spa trips with rich friends, things her salary couldn't possibly afford. I stood up, turned to my parents. "It was Emily. You both know it. You just don't want to admit it." For the first time, my mother raised her head and looked me straight in the eye. Her voice was low, cold. "We've had enough trouble already, Abigail. Don't you see? One damaged child is better than 2 destroyed ones." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They didn't just suspect me. They chose to cast me out to protect Emily. The next morning, I came back to my apartment and found my bank account frozen, my company email locked, voicemail full of messages demanding answers for embezzlement allegations, no official statement, no chance to explain, just gone. I tried reaching out to friends, colleagues. A few replied curtly, most didn't respond at all. I messaged the aunt I was once close to. She replied with just one sentence. "You should let this go." I became a ghost. No voice, no place. So I disappeared for real. I left Portland, left everything familiar. I moved to Vancouver, Canada, under my middle name, Abby Hart, and took a job at a small bookstore near the train station. There I was just a quiet girl, living in silence, no social media, no contact with anyone from before. And though I tried to move on, there were nights I lay awake, heart screaming with the unanswered question, did they ever think about me? Regret it? But now, after watching that video, I had my answer. Not only did they not regret it, they held a fake funeral to tell the world I no longer existed. It's not that they didn't know I was alive. They chose to erase me from their lives, to protect my sister, to redistribute the inheritance, to eliminate the name Abigail Callahan from anything that might bring them shame, and they thought I'd never come back. They were wrong. I tried to forget. I told myself it was behind me, that I had survived the worst fall of my life. But life doesn't let you rest. It all started when I tried to recover an old email account, the one I used for job applications and paychecks back when I was in Portland. I needed to access a few old documents to complete my Canadian permanent residency application. A simple task. I thought it would take a few minutes. I typed in my username, entered the password, but the system threw an error. Account disabled. The account holder is deceased. I blinked. Read the message again? No way. I tried again. Tried to recover it using my old phone number. Useless. The email had been permanently deleted due to an official death report from local authorities. I sat frozen in front of the screen, my heart pounding. Maybe it was a mistake? A technical error? I opened the Oregon Department of Vital Records website, typed my name into the search bar. Abigail Elise Callahan. Born April 5, 1994, Portland. A record popped up almost instantly. Name, Abigail Elise Callahan. Date of death, August 17th, 2020. The cause? Car accident in Spain. Status, confirmed, no further verification required. Death certificate ID, ORD 78 F 6193. I held my breath. I had never set foot in Europe, never applied for a visa, never bought a plane ticket to Spain, and yet I died? There? I clicked Download Death Certificate. A PDF opened, complete with seals, ID numbers, and an electronic signature from a coroner, confirming I died of a traumatic brain injury in a collision on a highway near Barcelona. It didn't sound right, but who needed a perfect truth anyway? My throat went dry as I read. I couldn't even blink anymore. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate fabrication. Someone had created my death, with detailed information, context, even a specific location. And worse, they had fooled the government. I jumped out of my chair. My hands trembling, I pulled out my old personal file. U.S. passport, Canadian ID, health insurance card, rental contract in Vancouver, pay stubs. Everything with clear dates from 2020 to now. Nothing showed I'd ever left North America, let alone died in Europe. I opened a map, zoomed in on the highway near Barcelona, the place listed as where I died. A small coastal town, population under 4,000, no U.S. embassy, no major hospital. The perfect place to stage something. The question looped in my mind like a broken clock hand. Who did this? Why go that far? This wasn't just about cutting ties or removing me from the family. This was about erasing me from the world. Then I remembered my mother's eyes when she said, Undamaged child is better than two. I no longer had any doubts. My parents, Emily, they planned this, not just to erase me from their lives, but to benefit from my disappearance. I opened my laptop, logged into the Oregon State Property Management System, searched my name, and my heart dropped out of my chest. Every asset under my name, including the trust fund from my grandparents' life insurance and partial ownership in the company, had been fully transferred to Emily Callahan. Date: February 2021, 6 months after my death. This wasn't just personal betrayal. This was a massive asset transfer, legally processed under my name. I sat in the dark. My tiny apartment suddenly felt colder than ever. Outside the window, Vancouver was settling into winter, light snow drifting down, but the chill in my chest was far worse. They buried me with a story. Now I had to dig myself out. I thought I had braced myself for everything, that nothing could surprise me after learning I'd been erased so blatantly. Then I opened Instagram. Not mine. That account had long been deleted. It was Emily's. She had just switched her profile from private to public, and the algorithm had accidentally pushed one of her posts into my search while I was looking up Callahan information. One tap, and the truth rushed into my eyes like an undertow. The first line in her bio took my breath away. Newlywed, living fully, loved by those who always believed in me. Emily's page was filled with photos from a lavish wedding in Charleston, South Carolina. Golden sunlight pouring over long white-covered tables, a towering crystal champagne display, heart-shaped floral arches among ancient oaks, golden lanterns, a shimmering mermaid-style gown, blush-toned bridesmaid dresses, all staged like a dream I was never invited to. I scrolled through every photo. In the middle, one image hit me like a punch. My father, Richard, standing next to the groom, holding a microphone, beaming. The caption read, "For the daughter who always made us proud." I reread it over and over. Not for me. The one who used to wake up early to make coffee for my mom, worked extra jobs to pay for college, stepped in at the office when staff was short. But for Emily, the one who stole money, spun lies, and then went on living like I'd never existed. I kept scrolling. The next photo showed a hand with a massive diamond wedding ring. Below it, a "Thank you to our beloved parents" for funding the entire wedding, including the new home they had just moved into in Lake Oswego, one of the most upscale neighborhoods in Portland. I reopened the property records, this time checking real estate ownership. That house had once been registered under my name by my father, part of an investment he promised to give me as a reward after I'd completed my MBA. Back then, I declined to take it right away because I wanted to earn it myself. Now, it belonged to Emily Callahan Hart. Legal owner, transferred 9 months after my death certificate was issued. I checked the linked bank accounts listed in the family inheritance disclosure. Once again, my name was gone. In its place was a brand new hyphenated name, Emily Elise Callahan Hart, listed as the sole beneficiary of the Internal Scholarship Fund, the joint investment account left by our grandparents, and even a life insurance policy I didn't know existed. I sat there, numb, my whole body frozen. One thought began looping in my head. They didn't just replace me. They rewrote everything so I had never existed. I was once the designated heir. I was once chosen by my grandparents to hold the majority of the savings meant for future generations. I was once promised a managing partner role when my father retired. And now, everything belonged to Emily. I didn't see a single photo of me, not one mention, not even a "wish she were here." Aunt Margaret, who used to send me Christmas cards every year, stood beside my mother, smiling. My cousin Dean was clinking wine glasses. The whole family, happy, joyful, as if I had never been one of them. And what crushed me the most was when I zoomed in on a photo taken during my father's speech. Behind him was a large screen showing the bride's life moments. I saw one image, I recognized it instantly. It used to be a photo of me at age 8, sitting in the backyard garden, grinning. But it had been edited. My face had been replaced with Emily's. Sloppily done, but just convincing enough to fool an outsider. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased from history. Memories, assets, bloodline, all now carried Emily's name. And that's when I knew. If I wanted my life back, I couldn't stay silent. They may have buried me in lies, but it's that silence I'll now use to awaken the truth. My name is Lisa Crawford, and I'm 38 years old. After nearly 2 decades of hard work in construction and real estate development, I finally reached the biggest dream of my life. A modern villa perched atop a hill on the west side of Santa Clara, overlooking the entire Valley of Lights at night. Every brick, every ceiling detail, every transparent glass panel on the south wall was the result of tireless effort, persistence, and an unrelenting drive. This house isn't just a place to live. It's proof that I've overcome every stereotype, every rumor, and every form of disrespect. The housewarming party was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. I'd hired a professional event team, booked catering from my favorite French restaurant, and prepared every detail to welcome friends and colleagues. The people who had walked with me through this long, difficult journey. But when I returned home this morning to do one last check, I froze at the front door, the key still in my hand, not yet in the lock. From inside, I heard a familiar voice I didn't want to hear right now. My sister Rachel's voice. "Don't you think this is the perfect place for a wedding? The mezzanine will be great for the stage, and the backyard is big enough for a reception tent." I walked in, a storm of confusion and anger building inside me. Rachel was standing in the main hall, where the walnut wood floors still smelled brand new, alongside a blonde woman I assumed was a wedding planner. They were animatedly discussing decorations with white orchids and warm lights, acting as if this place was theirs. "Rachel?" I called her name in a calm but firm voice. "What are you doing here?" Rachel turned, her face lit up like she'd just won the lottery. "Oh, you're back. I thought Mom and Dad told you. They decided to give me this house as a wedding gift. Connor and I will start our family here." I stood frozen. Images flooded my mind. Me, surrounded by blueprints, countless sleepless nights adjusting technical specs, non-stop work just to secure enough funding. I had sacrificed personal time, ignored relationships, just to make this dream a reality. And now, Rachel, the youngest, pampered so much she's never held a stable job for more than 3 months, was casually claiming my dream like it was her birthright. "This is my house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I poured all my savings, effort, and time into building it." Rachel gave a soft, pitying smile, the same kind she'd used on me since high school. "But you live alone. You don't need such a big house. Mom and Dad said you'd understand if you thought about the family, a little." As if on cue, my parents entered through the back door without knocking. My mom immediately approached the wedding planner, pointing out where to place the floral arch. My dad avoided my eyes. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice now sharp. "Mom? Dad? Why is there a wedding being planned in my house?" "Lisa," my mom said in that sweet, manipulative tone I knew all too well, "Rachel's getting married, and this house is just too big for a single person. You're always busy, barely home. We thought it made more sense for Rachel to live here." A wave of disbelief hit me so hard I had to lean on the stair railing. For a moment, I felt betrayed by my own blood. But then I clenched my fists, my eyes turning cold. I couldn't let them keep treating my accomplishments like a gift to be handed off. Not again. "Everyone out of my house, now." Rachel's eyes widened, her mouth opening to protest, but my dad spoke first, his voice dropping into that patronizing tone he used when lecturing a stubborn child. "Lisa, don't blow this out of proportion. This is for the good of the family. You're successful, you can build another house anytime, but Rachel is starting a new life. She needs a stable place to raise a family." I let out a dry laugh that echoed through the marble-floored foyer, the same marble I personally picked out in Italy and had shipped here. You're telling me that because I'm capable, I should sacrifice for someone who won't even try. Rachel stepped forward, her eyes full of fake confidence. You just don't get it. This is the first time I'm really serious. Connor and I are trying. Mom and Dad just want to help us start with a solid foundation. A solid foundation? I looked each of them in the eye. One, you didn't even break a sweat for? The air grew heavy. My mom nervously tucked her hair behind her ear, a habit she had when she felt cornered. Lisa, you seem tired. Let's not argue. Anyway, your father handled the paperwork, right? Legally, it might still be flexible. I squinted. In that instant, it all clicked. This wasn't just a spontaneous overstep. It was a premeditated plan, cleverly disguised as a wedding gift. I didn't hesitate any longer. I walked over to the dining table, opened my laptop, and typed a few quick commands. Then I turned the screen toward them. Here's the full legal documentation. Construction contracts, city-issued building permits, invoices for materials, payments to contractors, all paid from my personal account. And most importantly, I opened a folder labeled Property Deed. Inside was a scanned copy of the ownership certificate, under the name Lisa M. Crawford. This villa legally belongs to me, and only me. There is no other name on it, not even our parents. Rachel's lips parted, her face pale. But Dad said, your dad, I looked at him, had nothing to do with the permit process. I dealt with the Department of Building and Safety myself. I submitted the paperwork, I waited for approval. I handled every contact personally. I even recorded contractor meetings. If needed, I can submit all of it in court. The silence in the room was suffocating. I stood tall, no longer wavering. I won't let anyone, family or not, take away the work of my lifetime just because they want a fancy wedding. Lisa, you can't do this, my mom choked out. You're destroying this family over a house. No, Mom, I said quietly. You're all destroying this family by treating me like an emotionless ATM. Without waiting for a response, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had saved long ago. Hi, Alex, it's Lisa. Please resend all the house contracts and deeds to my email. I want printed copies today. And while you're at it, call the security company. I want all the locks changed and surveillance installed before tomorrow night. My dad's face flushed, his voice now low and stern. You're crossing a line. A line? I turned back, my tone calm but firm. The line was crossed when you walked into my home and planned a wedding without even asking me. The line was crossed when I was treated as an obstacle because I don't have a family. I've been silent long enough. Rachel stepped back, clutching her dress. I thought... You thought I'd give in like every other time. I cut her off. You were wrong. I opened the large front door, the breeze carrying in the scent of the lavender I'd planted around the front yard. You have 10 minutes to leave. If not, I'll consider this trespassing and take appropriate action. They stood there, speechless. My mom began to cry, but this time, I felt nothing. My dad turned away, and Rachel glared at me like I was the traitor. Lisa, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't think you could be this heartless. I simply shrugged. I'm just protecting what's mine. If that bothers you, maybe it's time you learn to build something with your own two hands instead of waiting for someone else to hand it over. I closed the door after they walked out, my hands still slightly trembling. But this time, I didn't back down. This was my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone control it anymore. Less than 2 hours after I saw Rachel and my parents out, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Messages from Aunt Patty, then Uncle Mark, then even my cousin, who I hadn't spoken to in over 3 years, suddenly showed up, all carrying the same message. Family comes first, Lisa. Don't be so selfish. One person called me a walking refrigerator. Another texted, you only have one sister. Houses can be rebuilt, but once family ties are broken, they can't be restored. I read every line, fully clear-headed. Not one of them asked why I had to do what I did. No one cared about the fact that I was the one who poured sweat, tears, and my youth into every brick of this house. I set the phone aside and poured myself a cup of peppermint tea. As the steam rose from the porcelain mug, I suddenly remembered when I was 14 and Rachel lost the bracelet our mom gave her, then blamed me for it. I was grounded for a week, while she was taken to buy a new bracelet 3 times more expensive. Today's incident was really just a repeat. Bigger, more expensive, and this time, I wasn't staying silent. The phone rang. Rachel. I stared at the screen. I didn't answer, but just a few seconds later, a voicemail popped up. I hesitated, then hit play. Lisa? Her voice laced with mockery. You should take a look in the mirror. You're jealous of me, always have been. I'm the one who's loved, who gets chosen as maid of honor, who's having the big wedding. And you? You've got an empty house and some papers no one cares about. That's not winning, Lisa. That's loneliness. I ended the message before it finished. Jealous? A word that had become a tired script in Rachel's playbook. To her, every time I objected to something, it was because I was jealous. Jealous that she was pampered. Jealous that someone always bailed her out. Jealous that she lived off others' kindness without ever paying a price. I went into my contacts and blocked Rachel's number, then Mom's, then Dad's. 3 taps. And suddenly, the world was eerily quiet. I just sat there, alone in the wide-open kitchen with its gleaming granite countertops, the afternoon light stretching through the glass doors. The silence felt like relief. No more questioning, no more demands, just me and the home I fought to protect. I thought things had finally settled down. That is, until my inbox started filling up with emails from relatives across the country. One from my aunt, subject line in bold, "How could you ruin your sister's wedding like that?" Another from one of my mom's old friends, who even wrote, "Can't believe Lisa turned out to be so controlling. The family used to be so proud of you." I gave a dry laugh. Everyone had opinions, as long as they weren't the ones paying to lay the foundation. That night I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop, scrolling through every file in the villa project, from the very first sketches to every invoice for materials. I backed everything up to a separate hard drive, then sent a full copy to my lawyer, Alex. The very next morning, I called Alex. "Hi, Lisa, I read your email. Is something going on?" "I need to be ready for anything," I said firmly. "If they try to claim ownership of the house, I want to have every piece of legal proof and witness documentation. And I need to know, in the worst-case scenario, can I file a restraining order?" Alex paused for a few seconds, then said, "I'll get started. With everything you've provided, you have a very strong case." I nodded, feeling just a bit lighter. That afternoon, while reviewing design plans for a new project, the doorbell rang. On the security monitor appeared a familiar face. Rachel, holding a pristine white wedding dress, standing next to Connor, the fiancé I'd only met once. I didn't answer the door. Rachel rang the bell twice more, then started knocking, her expression shifting from hopeful to theatrical. I stayed seated, holding a cup of now-cold tea. A notification popped up from the security system. Cloud backup of footage complete. I smiled. I didn't know what Rachel was planning next, but this time, I had more than just locked doors and concrete walls. I had evidence. I had the law, and most importantly, I had myself. A Lisa who no longer stayed quiet, and who would never let anyone else decide for her again. Just 3 days after the intense confrontation with Rachel and my parents, I received an email from the office of my attorney, Alex Parker, who'd been with me since the early days of the villa project. The subject line was short and clear: "Restraining order approved." I opened the attachment and read every bolded line. The Santa Clara City Court had officially granted a restraining order against Rachel Crawford, Daniel Crawford, and Carol Crawford, prohibiting them from coming within 100 feet of any property owned by Lisa M. Crawford. Any breach would be considered a legal violation. I let out a deep breath, like lifting a heavy weight that had been sitting on my chest for weeks. This house, the home I had built with everything I had, was finally protected, the way it deserved. That afternoon, I requested the security company to finalize the surveillance system and integrate smart alerts into my phone. I even had a remote-controlled gate installed with facial recognition. No one outside my approved list could set foot here anymore. While the technicians were working, I got a call from Alex. Lisa, I've sent the official notice and restraining order copies to all 3 of them. I've also backed up all the emails and video footage from that confrontation. If they try anything, we have enough to take this to court. Thank you, Alex, I said, looking out the glass windows where the sunset spilled over the valley. I just want to live in the space I created, without having to be on guard around my own family. Trust me, Lisa. After reading that order, they'll be the ones watching their steps. The weekend arrived faster than I expected. The housewarming party I once thought would be canceled because of family drama had turned into a warm, heartfelt event. I invited only those who truly mattered. Colleagues who'd worked with me for over a decade, college friends who once shared cramped apartments with me, kind neighbors who helped watch the house when I was away, and the team of architects, the ones who helped turn my dream into reality. Sarah, my best friend since school, was the first to arrive, carrying a bright bouquet of yellow tulips. Lisa, this house looks even better than the renderings. I laughed. If it weren't for you, I would have given up during the permit stage. The mood quickly turned lively. People strolled through the rooms, the high-ceilinged oak living room, the open-concept kitchen with pristine white granite, the fully soundproofed office where I hoped to launch my next project. As I led everyone to the backyard, the sunset stretched over the infinity pool. String lights wrapped around the olive trees began to glow, twinkling in the evening breeze. One friend whispered, Lisa, looking at this house makes me want to apply for a change of address right now. I smiled, truly feeling like the owner of this place for the first time in weeks. But the biggest surprise came at the end of the party. While guests were enjoying macarons and wine, I received a message from Alex. Alert, Rachel spotted near the property. Camera recognition shows she's standing at the north corner of the street, not crossing the restraining boundary. I've contacted local police to log the incident. I didn't react outwardly, just quietly locked the back door via my phone and activated the secondary alert system. No one at the party noticed anything. I still raised my glass, still chatted, still smiled brightly. By midnight, most guests had left, and Sarah stayed to help me tidy up. She stood on the terrace, looking down at the valley glittering with lights. Rachel's mom called me yesterday, she said softly. She wants me to talk you into forgiving. Said the whole family is in chaos, Rachel's not eating, and you should be the bigger person. I looked at her, silent for a long moment before replying. You know what gave me the most peace today? What? That for the first time in my life, I threw a party without worrying someone would show up and ruin it. Sarah didn't say anything else. She just hugged me, quietly. That night, I sat alone in the reading room, the soft light casting a glow over the new design plans spread across the table. This villa was no longer just a symbol of personal achievement. It was the triumph of courage, of standing up for myself. 1 week after the housewarming party, I was in my office reviewing plans for a lakeside housing development when the doorbell rang. A notification from the security system appeared instantly on my phone. Visitor, Brandon Hayes. Appointment confirmed via email. I frowned. Brandon was Rachel's fiancé. We'd never had a real conversation, other than a brief handshake at their engagement party a few months ago, which my parents had forced me to attend. I went to the door. Brandon stood there in a neat gray suit, holding a thin folder. In the midday sun, his face had lost its usual confidence. His eyes were downcast, jaw tight, as if carrying something heavy. Sorry for dropping by unannounced, he said, voice quiet and slightly hoarse, but I didn't know who else to talk to. I stepped aside to let him in and led him to the living room. He sat across from me in the leather chair, placing the folder on the table like it was evidence in a courtroom. Rachel told me this house was hers, he began, eyes avoiding mine. She said it was a wedding gift from her parents, but it was under your name just for tax purposes. I gave a small smile. So, she's using that story now. Brandon swallowed hard. I believed her. She was very convincing. But after your housewarming party, when I saw your name engraved on the reading room wall, I started to question things. I stayed silent, letting him continue. She got evasive when I asked about the paperwork, and recently I discovered she's using her parents' names to apply for a large bank loan. I tried checking our accounts and found a lot of strange transactions, money being withdrawn and sent to an account under a real estate company I've never heard of, Crawford Luxury Estates. I frowned. That name sounded suspiciously familiar. Brandon opened the folder and pulled out several printouts. These are her recent social media posts. She's impersonating a real estate developer using images of your villa to promote herself. I took each page in hand. Every photo made my stomach twist. Rachel stood in front of my wrought iron gate, holding blueprints, smiling professionally as if she were the lead architect. Another showed the kitchen area, captioned, "A space designed by me, elegant, minimal, and perfect for the modern family." I sat up straight. You said she used your parents' names to apply for loans. Do you have proof? Brandon nodded, pulling out more documents. These are copies of the credit applications, the signatures. I believe they're forged. I set the papers aside, trying to stay composed. Have you confronted Rachel? She denied everything, then accused me of being jealous, saying I didn't trust the person I was about to marry. But Lisa, I think she's setting up something much bigger. Not just with me, but with your whole family, and her investors. I stood and walked to my personal file cabinet, retrieving a USB drive I had prepared beforehand. It contained all the legal documents, construction contracts, licenses, and original design files. Undeniable proof that I was the sole owner and principal designer of the villa. I'll send these to my attorney, I said slowly. We need to act before Rachel goes any further. Brandon nodded, the fatigue in his eyes replaced by a flicker of resolve. Thank you for not brushing this off. After he left, I returned to my desk, opened my laptop, and sent an urgent email to Alex with all the new documents attached. In the body of the message, I wrote just one line. She's not just lying to me. She's committing open fraud. We need to stop this. Immediately. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the reading room, staring out at the backyard where the soft lighting reflected off the water. This house used to represent freedom and success. Now it was a battleground. A place where I had to defend my dignity, my property, and my name against someone who used to be my own flesh and blood. Later that afternoon, just as I wrapped up a virtual meeting with my design team for the new project, my phone buzzed. A security system alert flashed across the screen. Motion detected in main hall. Unauthorized entry. I frowned. The landscaping crew was scheduled for tomorrow morning. No one else had access today. I immediately opened the camera app on my phone, and my heart nearly stopped. Rachel. She was standing in my living room, holding an iPad, gesturing around the space while speaking. Surrounding her was a group of about 8 well-dressed individuals taking notes, likely investors or potential clients. As you can see, this is the first in a series of luxury villas being developed by my company, Crawford Luxury Estates, Rachel said, her voice shamelessly confident. I personally designed every detail of this villa. Early investors will receive exclusive incentives during the pre-sale phase. I almost dropped my phone. She was hosting an investment tour inside my house, impersonating the developer, designer, and even using my name for fraud. I didn't hesitate a second. I dialed 911. Santa Clara Police Department, how can I help you? There's an intruder in my home using my private property to solicit illegal investments. The address is 42 Hillside Drive, villa registered under Lisa Crawford. I have a court-approved restraining order and the entire event is being recorded on my security system. Less than 10 minutes later, I heard the sound of police sirens approaching. On my phone screen, Rachel was still rambling in front of the group, but when 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, she froze. Police, everyone remain where you are. Who is Rachel Crawford? Rachel turned, forcing a smile. Is there a problem? You're violating a restraining order, unlawfully using property you don't own, and are suspected of financial fraud. You need to come with us for questioning. No, this is a misunderstanding, Rachel shouted, her voice cracking. I was just giving a family tour of the project. But the guests, those potential investors, were already backing away, their expressions shifting from confused to outraged. One man asked loudly, "Wait, this isn't her house? She said she was the lead developer." I opened the front door at that moment, stepping in with a copy of the property deed in hand. "Apologies for the confusion," I said, my voice calm but laced with fury. "I'm Lisa Crawford, the sole legal owner of this home, and everything you've just heard was a lie." Rachel struggled in the officer's grasp, tears forming in her eyes. "What are you doing in front of all these people?" "It's not me," I replied, staring her down. "It's the law." I turned to the group. "I urge you all to verify information before making any investments. She does not own a legitimate company, and she has no approved development projects. She is currently under investigation for impersonation, trespassing, and financial fraud." As the officers led Rachel out to their cruiser, I noticed neighbors watching from across the street, some on their porches, likely drawn by the sirens and flashing lights. I stepped back inside, shut the door, and exhaled deeply. At last, the truth was out. I thought everything would calm down after that incident, but just hours later, my mother called. "Lisa, have you lost your mind?" she shrieked. "You had your own sister arrested in front of everyone. Our family name is ruined." I paused a few seconds, then replied firmly, "I warned you. I won't let anyone exploit my hard work anymore, not even family." She choked up, then started crying. "You can't do this to your sister. She's just trying to build a future." "By stealing my house, impersonating me, and scamming investors?" I said bluntly. "If you defend her, you're choosing the wrong side." The call ended without a goodbye. I stared at the dimming screen, my chest hollow. That night, I sent all the evidence to Alex: security footage, social media posts, Brandon's statement, and the deed copy. In the message, I wrote, "We're moving forward with the lawsuit. Charges impersonation, trespassing, and financial fraud." 3 days after Rachel's arrest for the illegal investment tour at my villa, I was summoned to the Santa Clara Police Department to assist with the investigation. Detective Paul Ramsey, assigned to the case, met with me in a small conference room, a thick file and an open laptop with surveillance footage already laid out. "Lisa, I need you to stay calm for what you're about to hear," he said, voice slow and serious. "We believe Rachel's actions go far beyond just one fake tour. The investigation is uncovering a much larger-scale fraud operation." I clenched my hands under the table and nodded. "Based on banking data, security footage, testimony from her fiancé Brandon, and scammed investors, we've discovered that Rachel used your social security number, your professional credentials, including your real estate license and project experience, to fabricate a fake identity. She's been impersonating you for almost 8 months." My mouth fell open, but no words came out. Ramsey leaned forward. "She posed as you in a series of emails to investors. These people thought they were communicating directly with Lisa Crawford, the successful developer in Santa Clara, and collectively wired over $2 million into an account under a fake company, Crawford Luxury Estates." I choked back a breath. $2 million? Unbelievable. Ramsey pulled out some bank statements, pointing at the transactions. These funds came from various states. She promised 20-30% returns within 6 months, presented luxury villa designs, which were actually photos of your home. I was breathing hard. "What about my parents? Did they know?" Detective Ramsey nodded slowly. "We believe they were at least partially aware. Among the documents seized from Rachel's home, we found a series of loan applications, investment agreements, and signatures from Daniel and Carol Crawford. According to the bank, those signatures were used to guarantee a $750,000 loan for Rachel's fake company." It felt like ice water had been dumped over me. My throat went dry. My heart sank. You mean they're accomplices? We haven't made a final determination, Ramsey said. If they signed those documents believing the company was legitimate, they could be considered victims of Rachel's fraud. However, if they knowingly signed while aware Rachel was impersonating you, they could be charged as co-conspirators. I dropped my head, feeling the weight of everything collapse. The family I'd tried so hard to protect, despite their lack of support, was now possibly on the other side of truth and justice. We need you to confirm one thing, Ramsey said, more gently now. Did you ever authorize Rachel to use your name, personal information, or property for investment purposes? I looked him straight in the eye. Never. Not once. He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. Thank you. That helps us greatly. We'll be expanding the investigation and referring the case to the county's Financial Crimes Division. Given the amount of fraud and false identity involved, Rachel could be facing several years in prison. And if your parents are proven complicit, they won't avoid legal responsibility either. I sat in silence long after the interview ended. As I reached my car, my phone lit up with dozens of unread messages. One was from my mother. You can't imagine the pressure your sister is under. She's panicking. Can't you drop the charges? Family is about forgiveness. I didn't respond. That evening, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and drafted a brief email to Alex, my attorney. Subject: urgent media support. Body: we need to prepare for public backlash. If necessary, I'm willing to issue a press statement. I don't want anyone else falling victim to Rachel. Let's strategize first thing tomorrow. I hit send, then stood to pour myself a glass of water. From the kitchen window, the city lights twinkled in the distance, still peaceful as if nothing had happened. But I knew this battle was far from over, and this time, I wasn't just protecting my villa. I was protecting my name, my reputation, and the life I had built with every ounce of my youth. 3 days after the meeting with police, I received a call from St. Luke's Hospital. On the other end, a nurse gently informed me that Rachel had been admitted to the emergency room after a severe abdominal pain and was currently in the maternity ward, 3 months pregnant. I froze. No one, not even Brandon, who had just broken off their engagement, had mentioned Rachel being pregnant. The news hit like a blow to the chest, not because I was worried about her, but because I knew my mother would use this as her final trump card. And sure enough, less than an hour later, my mother called. Lisa? Her voice trembled, different from before. Your sister, she's pregnant. She's not doing well. The doctor said her emotional state could affect the baby. I said nothing. You've already won, Lisa. You have the house, the career, the world on your side. What more do you need? Your sister has lost everything and now she's carrying a child. Do you really want to send her to jail right now? I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. Mom, you just said Rachel has lost everything, but you forgot one thing. What she's trying to hold on to isn't life. It's a lie. And the baby? If you truly care about the child, then you should let justice take its course. No one can raise a child on stolen money and a fake identity. On the other end, my mother burst into tears. You're so cruel, Lisa. No, Mom. I'm just ending a long cycle of enabling, covering up, and unconditional forgiveness that only led to betrayal. I paused, my voice tightening slightly. Do you know how many loan papers you signed for Rachel? Do you know your name is now part of an open investigation? You're calling me cruel, but you're the one dragging this family down with blind trust. The call ended without a goodbye. The following week was a legal storm. Police officers, prosecutors, and even representatives from the defrauded investors gathered for the preliminary hearing. I was called as a key witness. Brandon also came forward, submitting all the emails, messages, loan documents, and most importantly, testifying that Rachel had personally asked him to pose as co-founder of the company to win investor trust. Throughout the investigation, Rachel refused to cooperate. She insisted everything was a misunderstanding between sisters and claimed she did it all to launch her own business. At one point, she even turned to her lawyer in tears, saying, "I was the hypocrite, trying to destroy my own sister out of jealousy over someone else's happiness." The judge was unmoved. On sentencing day, the courtroom was packed, with press, victims, and those waiting for restitution. Rachel was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed in front of the belly that now carried the child she had once tried to use as a get-out-of-jail card. I sat in the front row, back straight, eyes locked on the judge. "Santa Clara County Court," the judge's voice rang out, "after full review of evidence, witness testimony, and financial records, finds the defendant, Rachel Crawford, guilty of financial fraud, identity theft, and unlawful trespassing. Total damages exceed $2 million. The defendant is sentenced to 10 years in prison." The room went still for a moment. Rachel looked up, her eyes void of resistance. Only emptiness remained. Brandon sat behind me, head bowed in silence. It didn't end there. The judge proceeded to read the sentence for my parents. Because their signatures appeared on loan documents and they played a role in legitimizing some of the fund transfers, they were considered indirect accomplices. However, due to clean records and cooperation after the charges, they were granted 3 years probation and ordered to pay $150,000 in civil penalties. I felt no joy, no anger, only a strange lightness. That evening, when I stepped into the villa where it all began, I sat on the bench in the backyard, looking up at the starry sky. A soft breeze carried the scent of newly bloomed lavender. It felt like a chapter had finally closed. No noise, no celebration, just peace after the storm. My phone buzzed. A message from Alex. "Lisa, we got it all back. Congratulations." I typed back. "Not everything, but at least this time, I did what was right." I set the phone on the wooden table and looked ahead. A new chapter was waiting to be written, this time with no shadows following, no blind expectations, no empty promises. 6 months after the sentencing, I stood on the villa's rooftop terrace, a glass of white wine in hand, looking down at the neatly trimmed garden below. Rows of vibrant purple lavender bloomed along the stone walkway, just as I'd once envisioned in my original design. Everything had changed. Not just the landscape, but who I was inside. The story of Rachel's fraud had made front pages of several local newspapers. At first, I feared the scandal would severely damage the reputation of my company, Crawford and Hartman Development. But to my surprise, the opposite happened. It was my transparency, strength, and decisiveness in defending my rights and bringing the truth to light that made clients and partners see me differently. Instead of pulling away, they reached out. New contracts poured in, from upscale lakeside housing projects to commercial art space hybrids I had only dared to dream of. The city council invited me to speak at a forum on sustainable planning, and the press began calling my villa a symbol of modern women's resilience in the construction industry. And I decided not to let that just be a passing compliment. I began hosting charity events at the very house that had once been at the center of the conflict. The first was for the New Ground Foundation, which supports women entrepreneurs in construction and architecture. Women like me, who once had no mentors and had to walk alone. I invited everyone who had stood by me during the darkest times, colleagues, friends, even Brandon, who, after everything, had chosen to speak up at the right moment and didn't look back. Sarah, my longtime best friend, stood by my side the entire night. After my short speech, she whispered, "You know what, Lisa? If you had given up back then, everything would have been different. But look at you now. You didn't just build a house. You built a monument." I smiled. "Not a monument, just a new foundation for a life no one else gets to steer." The following month, I was invited to speak at the statewide urban development conference. I chose not to talk about success, but to tell the real story. About the times I was underestimated just for being a woman in the industry. About the family that tried to take away everything I had built. And about how I stood up. The speech ended with a long round of applause. A senior architecture student approached me afterward, her eyes shining. You gave me hope that I too can overcome the expectations of family and society. Thank you. Her words made my eyes well up. Not because I'm someone special, but because I was once that girl. And now I'm living proof that you can stay true to your values without sacrificing your dignity to please others. One weekend afternoon, I sat in my reading room, reviewing the file for a plot of land in northern Santa Clara. A new project. Everlight Villas. A line of eco-friendly homes designed for single mothers, affordable yet held to the highest standards of design and functionality. Alex walked in, carrying a stack of documents. The infrastructure board approved the first phase proposal, he said, setting the papers on the table. I've never seen them agree so quickly. I nodded, eyes still on the map spread across the table. I want this to be a fresh start for women who thought there was no place for them. He looked at me intently. You know, Lisa, after everything, you've still kept your heart intact. Only now, it's stronger and no longer easy to push around. I laughed. Because now I know where my boundaries are, and what I'll never let anyone cross. Not even family. The room softened. Outside the window, the sky glowed orange with sunset. Rays filtered through the curtains, casting golden light across the new designs. Not just architectural plans, but a blueprint for the rest of my life. Clear, grounded, and without space for manipulation. One early autumn morning, before the sun had dried the dew on the front stone steps, I found a cream-colored envelope tucked inside my mailbox. No return address, just a familiar handwriting. Lisa Crawford. I stood still for a moment, a heavy feeling rising in my chest. I knew exactly who had written it. I took the envelope into the reading room, sat by the window where the early light poured in like a pale gold streak. The scent of warm chamomile tea lingered on the table. I opened the letter with my bare hands, not in a rush, but without hesitation. Lisa, I don't know if I even deserve to call you sister anymore. But if there's anything left between us, even just a memory, I hope you'll read this to the end. I'm going to be a mom. It's a girl. The doctor says she's healthy. I felt her kick for the first time last week, and in that moment I cried like a child. Not from pain, but because, for the first time in my life, I wanted to do something right. I know no apology can erase what I did to you, to your home, to your name, and to the trust you once placed in this family. But I'm trying to change, little by little. In prison, every day is a confrontation with myself. No makeup, no pretense. I see the emptiness I've been living with for so long. You don't have to forgive me. But if one day my daughter asks about the first woman in our family who built a career from nothing, who had the courage to stand up for herself, I want to be able to tell her about you. Lisa Crawford, I hope you find peace. And if you can't forgive me, then at least believe that this time I truly want to be different. Rachel? I folded the letter slowly and placed it in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, where I keep things that don't belong in the present but can't quite be discarded either. I wasn't sure what I felt. Not anger, not forgiveness, not even sadness. Maybe just silence, like standing at the edge of a cliff. No fear, just emptiness. That evening, I walked through the backyard garden, my usual place for peace after a long day. Sarah called, inviting me on a weekend getaway to Monterey. I said yes. I figured I'd earned a break. Before bed, I opened my notebook, flipped to the first page of the Everlight Villas project, and added one more checkmark. Groundbreaking ceremony, next month. I looked at the line in fountain pen and smiled. Life goes on. There's still work to be done, homes waiting to be built. Not with money, but with trust. Trust in resilience, in justice, and in myself. I don't know if Rachel will ever truly change. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to look at her without remembering everything that happened. But I know forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness means refusing to let the past imprison your present. And even though things between me and my family may never be called reconciliation, I no longer feel guilty for living life on my own terms. I've learned to let go of what I can't control so I can hold on to what I can build. Like this villa, it's no longer just a house. It's a reminder that there are things you fight to protect and moments when you must dare to say no to protect your light. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds outside my window. The sun was rising, gentle, steady, just like me now. I poured a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and began scheduling my upcoming presentations. On the screen, the new tagline I had added beneath my company's logo stood out clearly. Success is yours. Don't let anyone steal your light. And I knew I was living that truth every single day. From my own story, I've learned that sometimes the ones who hurt us most deeply are the ones closest to us. But from that same pain, I learned how to stand, to defend the values and results I've worked hard to build. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to keep moving forward without carrying someone else's weight. Success doesn't require anyone's approval. It only needs you to know who you are, what you're doing, and why. No one has the right to take away the light you created for yourself. What do you think about Lisa's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more powerful and inspiring stories about life and family.